the 50s, it used to be a 6-building lots there, but that was back then. And now I'm proposing if we could do something different I haven't done before, is to create parking in the front for all units, and proposing to build 6 single-family homes. They're about 30 by 30, and something has been done in South Burlington, a couple areas. This is something be new, I believe, for the village, but I believe it's something interesting, and it'll be a good concept, and good for beginners, young couples with 1 child maybe, or 2. No garages. And then I did contact the railroad, and they're willing to give me, there's a line looking at it. I don't know what side that would be. They're willing to give me that dead end parcel. They have no access to it, is as a permanent easement. So I will pursue that. So I just wanted to get a feeling before, it's go forward and spend tons of money on engineering. And I just want a blessing. So if you guys could give me a blessing, I'll move forward, and I would be in front of you for the sketch plan, is what you're looking at right now. And hopefully we could have something move forward, before summer is over.
Robin, am I looking at something right now? Is there a plan?
Can you not see it?
It's to be coming from Gabe's side.
Oh, you didn't see it?
I don't
Okay,
see anything.
No, let's see if we could send it to you now. Yes.
I haven't seen much, but one thing I will say is Gabe said the park would be in front of the houses. Would be in front of the new houses. It would be behind an existing house on Maple Street, so it wouldn't be street frontage that has the parking.
Oh, thanks for the correction.
All right, so that's that crazy lot that. So I think the railroad tracks used to go through there, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, because we did a little something on off of Birch Lane, which is on the other side of Maple Street, and it had the same deal. It had a old rail spur that went through it. And I know the house that used to be on the front of the street was a friend of mine's, and so there is a large lot back there that could do something interesting.
Yes, and I thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I see it on the screen now, so thank you. And that's an interesting concept, because parking and housing is it's more of an apartment type setup where you walk to your apartment, which is fine, Robin, what is I see a number of hands up, so I'm going to ask Robin from the staff end of things to tell me what the zoning really says about this, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. Robin? Did we lose Robin?
No, Robin forgot to come out of mute. He certainly has the square footage. It's just a matter of how it sugars out, and how it goes when design development gets involved. As you can see, what we're looking at the moment, there's a house on Maple Street. There's an existing driveway, and it looks like the black dots look like vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
And then the parking, and then you sort of walk to. It's quite similar to what Bill Niket did. I'm not sure you're familiar with that, John, but it was actually very nice. He did have covered parking, but.
And is there a limit to the number of, like, we'll call them units that you can have off a single driveway? Does it fall into that kind of thing?
Well, no. One thing we did change in the code was it said that any more than 5 units had to be blacktop, but we changed it to say it could be gravel.
Mm-hmm.
That was for the property, wasn't specific with that property off Lincoln Street. Oh, can't remember the name of the property owners. So I think this will come down, you know, as it's a PUD, it'll come down to design.
Yeah, so it's a PUD. I'll say that maybe some of the neighbors might have something to say about it because the units are arranged fairly close to the property edges. And I'll also say that it'll probably test our PUD language that tends to look for why this is such a great idea, because it's different than what's regular and what's typical. So it's that trade-off between, well, we're getting a little more housing, a little more density, which has been something we're looking for. But in the meantime, we've preserved some open space and we've protected the general character of the neighborhood, and we have something special to offer. You are right next to Maple Street Park, but you're sort of tucked away in a location that's a little bit off the main pathways. So maybe connectivity and a way to create a real interesting and neighborly feel amongst the people that are on the parcel might be, something to shoot for.
Right.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the planning commission have a question at the moment? And other people in the audience, Mia Watson, you've had your hand up for a long time. Are you ready?
Yes, I am a member of the Essex Housing Commission, and we've been trying to attend planning committee meetings when possible, just to be present and aware of the discussion. I'm just here to observe, but if you have any questions about our work as it relates to planning, I'm happy to answer those questions as well. So thank you.
I would be interested to know what the Housing Commission thinks about sort of these infill developments. We've had some that have been deemed successful and some that have been deemed maybe too much or not quite what everybody was thinking. My personal feeling is that housing comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and if you build it, it'll be good for somebody. But you want to do a nice job to make sure that the community maintains respect for the development, because if it's not done, well, or to what we hope are minimum standards, then they tend to not be successful, or they fall into disrepair. So, what does the commission have a stance on infill housing at the moment?
I don't think we have a written policy about that, but generally it's been the opinion of the commission, I think most of the members, that, Essex desperately needs housing. This is infill development, so it's not like it's being built on pristine woodlands or anything. It's, in the middle of the existing development, and it's especially interesting to me because the small size, and that it's, from what I understand, he was saying that it's intended for home ownership. Building, I don't know the details about this project, but building new single family homes almost exclusively happens at the high end of the market. So very few options are coming online currently for people who are just starting out or people who want to downsize and are of moderate means. So, I'd be interested to see what prices are, possible, especially given the escalating costs of development that we're seeing right now. But I, without knowing more about the project, I think this type of project in general sounds like what the village and the town of Essex need.
Thank you. I'll add that over the years, Gabe has become increasingly sophisticated in his delivery of good quality housing at a price that nobody else can really get to. So it's really a win for the village to have somebody develop parcels that that are providing that housing that we don't so desperately need, and not way off the chart on price. So he's got a pretty good track record going, and I do look forward to seeing what this turns out to be. Nick Meyer, your hand is up. We can't hear a thing you're saying, so whatever's going on, if you're there, now's your shot.
Can't hear.
I don't hear a thing from Nick Meyer. I'll move on to anyone else at this point, and if Nick gets his microphone sorted out, we'll listen to him. Sarah Stoltz.
Hi. I am not sure if this is the time to make a public comment about anything. Is that okay?
Anything that's not on the agenda, and specifically if it was about the current plan on the screen, that would be ideal.
Okay, it's not on the current screens, what's on the current screen. So should I wait?
Let me just ask if anyone else has a comment on Gabe Handy's concept plan that's in front of us right now. Hearing none. Gabe, thank you very much. I'm going to say continue to work with Robin on developing the plan. Robin, I expect that you'll bring any, let's say, technical issues to us to review that might have to do with how this development might fit into the land development code. But as a PUD, I think you have a pretty good starting point.
Thank you very much for listening and taking me on tonight unexpectedly. I appreciate that very much, and I'll look forward to seeing you.
Thank you, Gabe.
Bye-bye.
All right, Sarah, you are on.
Okay, great. Thank you. I apologize. I do have a meeting that I have to get to at 6:30, so otherwise I would stay longer. I just wanted to let you know that some other parents and myself have formed a group that we're naming Essex for Healthy Kids. And in light of the potential vote for a cannabis sale in Essex, we are coming together to raise concerns about any shops, should it pass, should it go on for the vote, we don't know yet, and should it pass, we're very concerned about the types of shops that have been coming to Essex Junction. We think that some of the adult shops and smoke shops and vape shops are far too close to schools, far too close to where people are congregating as families with young children, and we'd like it to stop. So I'm here to express our concern, and we want to sort of be ahead of the game here before any decisions are made to find out what we need to do to make sure that the integrity of our village center is kept G-rated, honestly. I also think that, it's kind of hypocritical that we're teaching our kids right now about the dangers of pot in school and health class. And I think it would be ridiculously hypocritical and conflictual to place a shop that sells pot near our schools. That just says, don't do it. Oh, but here you go. You can have access to it if you want. Or, boy, this is really okay. So we are also wanting to really educate the community about the dangers for our young children and their brain development as part of our effort as well. But for you guys, the planning commission, not guys, but the planning commission, we want to know what steps we need to take or who we need to speak to make sure that should something pass, these shops are not within a certain radius of our schools and our families who are in our walkable, bikeable community. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a fine sentiment. I'm not sure what the rules actually tell us about that right now. I know typically there are, radii from schools and other key places that, you can't have certain things. We're in the middle of rewriting our land development code, so we'll take a look at what we might have in place there. And I'm guessing we'll work with within the regulations that will be imposed on us by the state if something passes at the state level, and within any guidance that we get from our village trustees that typically like to weigh in on this kind of thing. I'm not sure that we have. I'm not sure what steps we take as a planning commission other than to listen to those guidance, take that guidance, which is kind of for us, we work at the discretion of the trustees, and then the legal issues are something beyond our control as well. But where we can maintain protection for our community, we will. And so
John,
I'll say we'll wait and see what happens. But I don't know, Robin, what do we have in there now for,
Well, there's not a lot. I mean, the zoning code isn't a morality code. It's a code that breaks down categories. But I will say, as we don't have enough committees, we're now forming a cannabis committee, and they'll be taking a look, routes to school and so on. Obviously, you don't want anything near any route to school or anything like that. So they'll be looking at the best way forward. I do believe, but it's it's a moving target, that the earliest anything could happen in the village would be May 2022. But the cannabis committee is hoping to have its first meeting maybe probably later this month. There's a group of 5 or 6 people on it.
I'm just trying to think of what the nearest, let's say, retail establishment of any kind that sells something that is not allowed for sale for minors. And I'm guessing, and I could be completely wrong, but I'm guessing it's Central Beverage, fairly close to Summit Street and Fleming. In physical distance, even though they don't see them right together, that because they sell tobacco, and other products. But other than that, I'm not aware of anything that's actually, that close to one of our schools. Or certainly within one of the distances that are normally established, like 500 feet or something. I don't know what they are, but so people may want to think about how that gets measured and what regulations are in place to establish those. But the planning commission, as Robin points out, isn't necessarily the body that determines that kind of thing. Any other comment on this subject? Commissioners, members of the public? Okay, thank you very much, Sarah. What's on our agenda now, Robin?
Well, I will say that Will and David from the Essex Energy Committee are here tonight, and they'd like to talk to us, give some input to how we can craft the code to be more responsive to energy needs of the community.
Awesome. So who would like to go first?
Hi, Mr. Chair, or John. This is Will Dodge. I'm the chair of the Energy Committee, and we have David Scopin has joined tonight, who's another member of the committee, and I think that might be Phil March as well, who's another committee member. And I think Robin asked us to come after we made a presentation to the select board a little while ago, the Essex Select Board. And I'm gonna just plead that I would have loved to have made a much more Essex Junction Planning Committee specific presentation, but due to a combination of workload and other things, I don't really have a something tailored to your committee. But I thought that I would at least kind of go over some of the highlights of that presentation, if it's okay with you, and then we can maybe talk a little bit more about the specifics with the recommendation at the very end.
Awesome.
So if that's okay, give me 1 second and I'll just throw this up. So again, this is kind of a repeat of what we talked about with the select board, but since one of those, just to kind of give an introduction, the purpose of the Energy Committee, and you'll see it's under Town of Essex, Vermont letterhead, but some of the purposes of our committee is to track municipal energy usage and make recommendation to the select board, targets and actions for decreasing energy use. Same thing with looking at renewable energy sources and increase the efficient use of energy within town operations, looking for options for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, managing data, helping with annual reports, and looking at educational programs. We have the right to request appropriations through the town for operating expenses, as well as funding to look at our duties. And the reason that I put this slide up in part with the select board was to say that since the inception of the committee, we have been acting as though we are the energy committee for both the town and the village, really without distinction, but also noting the very important differences in some senses between town and village. And after we had a kind of a lively meeting about it earlier this year, our position is that we're going to keep trying to be the energy committee for both the village and the town until someone tells us we can't, which will hopefully be never, but we'll be prepared for that if and when that happens. So in 2019, both the trustees and the select board adopted an energy plan that covers town and village, and that has various different goals. Some of them are land use focused, and obviously you guys, I think, at some point had a look at that plan, but if you hadn't, then we should probably make that more for another time. It had transportation goals, which were focused on some of the things that you guys have been very focused on, basically bikeability, walkability, using more public transit, and trying to reduce transportation-related energy demand. Thermal goal, which is basically the big one being 100% residential weatherization, 38% commercial and industrial, and then other goals with, switching over from fossil fuel or finding other ways of efficiency. And then a renewable energy goal, which had a lot of tenets to it, but to boil it down, basically talking about a minimum of 15 megawatts of solar on existing rooftop and paved surfaces throughout the town and village. So some of the things that the Energy Committee has been focused on in the last little while, one of the best things that have really happened in energy in Essex is the hiring of Tom Yandow. And he's not been here tonight, but Tom is working with the town and the village on a whole variety of projects. So just to give you some examples, this is the town fire department building. When Tom started, there were like gaping holes in the doors. There were problems with the roof. And there was a lot of like old, light bulbs that needed to all be changed out. As a result of changes that Tom has been made, he's cut the utility bills for that building by about 50%. Another project that's being worked on is the Sandhill Park pool. It has there's been a demand for some time because of like the swim team and others who have to jump in that pool first thing in the morning to at least have some level of heating. That's kind of a concern. But since Vermont Gas was running a line through there anyway, Tom managed to get 96% efficiency boilers to ultimately have a heated pool. And in doing so, ended up with $4,400 back from Vermont Gas, which is obviously a good thing. Tom's been working with Vermont Gas on insulation work for the Memorial Hall, which is in Essex Center. There's more money needed because Efficiency Vermont can only provide some amount of money, and same with Vermont Gas. So that's an ongoing project, but we're ultimately trying to make that a more comfortable space for everything from summer camps to the community players to even meetings. And then there's some other projects, like, for instance, this is the town office in Essex Junction, where we're replacing all the fluorescent light fixtures with LEDs, with dimmable lighting to make it a little more livable and easy. There's some other projects that I haven't mentioned here, like Tom is continuing to work on the police station, which serves both town and village, to deal with energy problems there. So those are just kind of a snapshot of some of the things that we've been working on. When you look at kind of one of the overall big goals, which is weatherization, what the energy plan points out is that the thermal sector is really the highest level of greenhouse gas emissions in, or the second highest GHG emissions and the highest energy user in Vermont. So there's been a lot of focus on weatherization. And part of what we've looked into, especially our colleague Phil March, is the fact that over time, based on records that are with the Department of Public Service, a lot of the weatherization efforts, which are measured based on what's called the blower door test, which you can guys see the schematic here, is really showing up that a lot of houses that are supposed to have been comprehensively weatherized are not, at least in Essex and specifically in Essex Junction, are not really going through comprehensive weatherization on the whole. There's been audits done that have looked at kind of measures to somewhat improve the leaky doors and insulation, but ultimately it's not been a focus of Efficiency Vermont, and it's something that we're trying to change through some discussions with the legislature and so forth. And it's going to get me to a point that I'm going to return to later on about what I think what the Energy Committee feels that we can do. In terms of net metering, which is kind of the renewable energy front, right now, the Vermont statutes allow for up to 500 kW of generation credit for off-takers, and that includes municipalities. Right now, the town outside the village has a contract with Green Lantern Solar for about 200 kW, meaning that there's about another 300 kW of offset potentially available if a solar company builds another project. Similarly, with the village, we have a contract for 150 kW with Encore Solar, meaning there's still 350 kW to do more with. So we've been in discussions with Norwich Technologies about looking at a single project that might ultimately allow if it's sited the right way, you could have both the town and village taking advantage and ultimately offsetting that extra 650 kW of credit. So those are some of the things that we have been doing and focusing on. I'm going to just hand it over briefly to my colleague David to talk about why we're concerned that not enough at the town and the village level is ultimately being done, and to kind of give you a sense about what it is that the committee thinks about. So David, you want to join in?
Sure. Certainly one of our chief focuses is on reducing the overall carbon footprint, for the simple reason that a fellow like Bill Gates would write a book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, which I'm not going to bore you with. As you know, it's a moving freight train. It's heading our direction. We can't avoid not acting on it. So with that, I think one of our focus is going to be very, very strategic. If we think about how to lower our carbon footprint, we might say, well, buy an electric school bus. If I stop and think about it a little more carefully, I realize that if children are going to and from school in the family car, I have a carbon footprint there that I could eliminate by simply putting them all on a gas-powered school bus. So some of the things we're hoping to do in the very near future is have someone who is very skilled at and strategic about looking around and seeing where some of our leaky doors are, et cetera. Like if we're thinking about buying an electric weed whip, well, what about mowing and using and trimming half as often? Or if we could get our neighbors to drive half as much, make one trip and hit all the different things rather than 2 or 3 a week. So those are the things we're thinking about, and it's obvious that we could probably change things significantly by simply being a little more conscious and efficient. And with that, I'll turn it back to Will.
Thank you, David. So what I'll just describe, with that in mind, and the fact that we kind of need to be doing more to protect the planet and to protect our communities when it comes to energy usage and greenhouse gases. Here are a couple of the things that we've made recommendations to the select board. So one is to try to install some solar at Sand Hill Park in the building. It's turned out that that's a very good slot potentially to not turn it into a giant solar panel, but just to have some strategic ones, both on the rooftop of the building and maybe in a couple choice places around the pool. Another important one and all of these are all grounded at some part of the energy plan itself, but to be doing more by encouraging the town to use electric vehicles and electric maintenance tools whenever possible. At a bare minimum, when the current vehicles that the town uses are sort of at the end of their useful life, we ought to be replacing them with electric. Another one, which we already talked about, is looking at that net metering for use of the 650 kW capacity, and maybe potentially siting something that is, part in the town, part in the village, to take advantage of that credit that's out there, both for money and in terms of our renewable generation. But these are some of the ones that come a little bit closer to the Junction Planning Commission. One is to really work with the Community Development Office for weatherization promotion in 2021. What Phil's work showed is that even though the Energy Committee and others have been, and we've even worked with other energy committees from Jericho and from Westford, we spent a lot of time with Efficiency Vermont and the Button Up campaign trying to make weatherization successful, but they're really not getting to where they need to be. And given that Essex Junction has the greatest density of housing in the area, and thinking about them trying to get to 100% residential weatherization, we need some more partners and need some more emphasis to figure out how to kind of tactically get our hands around dealing with that. Another idea that we really like, and this kind of comes in part from Tom Yandow's experience, is the idea of a hired energy building inspector who's looking at different properties, whether as a result of permitting or maybe just through kind of volunteer or knocking on people's doors to ask them to look at whether there are steps that can be taken to ultimately make sure that when a building is deemed, is supposed to be energy efficient, if it's actually meeting its goals. So some of the things that are actually in that energy plan that was adopted in 2019 include thinking about incorporating the Vermont Building Energy Stretch Code to cover all development in the zoning regulations for the town and the village, and also consider kind of a way that when houses are sold, if it's possible, to have a means of ultimately having the energy inspector look through and see if there's possibilities to take advantage, frankly, of all the money that's out there for weatherization, but that's just not seeming to reach its targets. It's not a perfect analogy by any means, but it reminds me a little bit about vaccinations and the fact that it's one thing to have a vaccine out there, but the important part is getting it into people's arms. With weatherization, it's similar. There's plenty of funding, plenty of resources out there, but to actually get it into people's attics or people's doors is a much greater ask. The last two recommendations that we talked about is a potential annual budget for our energy committee so that we can work a little better with folks to actually make more of those goals, and also to regularize the check-ins on energy plan implementation among all the committees in Essex, whether it be, both of the planning commissions, the town select board and the village trustees, and even like the bike and walk committee and the trails committee as something important to do. So ultimately, we're trying to make a little more progress on this very important goal. We really appreciate all the work that you guys have been doing and would be
Yikes. Look like we lost him there.
Got him back.
We got him back?
Wasn't me, Will. Might have been John, but it wasn't me.
No, it was me. It was the product of a long day. So I appreciate that. It's always easy to hit the wrong button at the end of a long day.
One thing. Sorry, John. One thing I would say is, you can get an idea of some of the benefits if you check out Design Five Corners Facebook site. We try to publish aspirational things on that site rather than what might happen in other Facebook sites, let's just say. One thing that a lot of municipalities have been doing in Europe is they've stopped cutting their median strips. They've stopped, trying to create lawns in the property owned by the municipality. This not only saves staff time, it saves fuel, it saves the number of machines you need, and it also creates places for pollinators to come, and then they go into Diane's back garden and pollinate her apple trees, and go to John's and pollinate his pear trees. And it's really a holistic approach to saving energy, which looks at as many options as possible. I can't remember the last one I printed. It might have been Swindon in England. They saved £45,000 a year. Was that $60,000 a year? Just on petrol and other things by leaving the median strips in, and plus they look beautiful. The nice thing about if a meadow, you don't actually have to plant it. All you do is go into it occasionally and cut out what you don't want, as in wild parsnip. It's amazing what nature will let you have, and all it costs you is a little bit of patience.
That's great. And I should have said at the outset, I think one of the most valued and maybe underutilized energy resources that the town and village has is Robin Pierce, because Robin has done like amazing work on his weatherization guide. And so part of our thinking is like, we need to make better use of Robin, and that part of that might be to team up more with the CDO. But I can't imagine that that it wouldn't help even for some of the stuff that Robin is trying to achieve if there was like an energy coordinator or an energy building inspector that ultimately helps to look at, whether some of like the new buildings that are coming into Essex Junction ultimately, do what they're supposed to in terms of energy production.
Absolutely will. And by the way, the check's in the mail.
Well, let me chime in. I actually sat in today on a web presentation by Renewable Energy Vermont, and they went over legislation in the state that has either passed or is waiting for next year. But my thoughts and comments to you guys on the Energy Commission would be to really stay in touch with what the state initiatives are, because they're not small. They've got some really big legislative initiatives out there to try and hammer on energy. And so does the federal government, and they're basically saying that there's a lot of money available For example, today they told us that there's $2 million being put forward through Efficiency Vermont for energy efficiency and weatherization projects, not only in residential locations, but in workforce and other business opportunities. So there's apparently a lot of awareness about energy. There's the Climate Council, the State of Vermont's Climate Council, which is trying to develop right now programs and policies that will come into effect next year. So the state's really making a committed effort at the legislative level to support these ideas and concepts. It may take a while to trickle down. I will say that Tom Yandel is doing a great job locally, but that we really need to find the connection between what the state is doing and their goals and what our local community policies and goals are. And if you guys can help us with that and look for things that we should be including in our regulations, I know that would be really helpful. I'll draw your attention also to some very controversial but ongoing discussions in Burlington about BTU use and energy fuels, and they're basically calling for new and existing buildings to be carbon neutral by something crazy like 2030. I forget exactly what the date is, but it's some significant push to improve how much energy is used in their built environment. And they feel like they have the muscle to go ahead and do that. And I know that's not quite gotten out to us in the suburbs, but those goals are out there in many communities, and people are pushing to various degrees to get us all on the same page and committed to that. So I would look to you guys to kind of help us, really formulate the strategies and get it into our common approach.
Thank you, John. That's great. And to let you know, Tom is actually, he is now going through the land development regulations, and he says he has a laundry list. So we'll try to formalize that and give that to you guys. And maybe we meet again once we've got something so we can have another discussion. But I definitely appreciate those thoughts. And we are definitely keeping the pulse of what's going on with the Global Warming Solutions Act and all the federal money.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. I see a hand up. Natalie, would you like to make a comment?
Yes. I'm also on the Essex Energy Committee, and I am 100% in line. Hold on, I have to have David mute his. My husband David is in the other room here. Fortunately, we have folks on the committee with their fingers squarely on the pulse of the Vermont legislation, to some degree, the national efforts, and definitely what they're doing in Burlington. And I would love to see us being as intensely committed to and moving forward in the same way that I'm delighted to hear your support and your interest in us having some real leadership in these areas. The key thing is we have to just keep pushing and pushing. It's the initiatives are there at the state level, but if we do not, we just have to keep leaning in on it consistently. And the folks in Burlington have, that the councilors, especially in Burlington on the city council, have really done some very cutting edge work around moving us around climate change mitigation. So music to my ears, John, to hear you say, are you paying attention? And we are. Absolutely. So I'm hoping we can move Essex and Essex Junction right along in step with some of that real climate positive thinking that we're beginning to see around the country.
Good. I'll just add one more thing, which is our AIA Vermont. Well, I'm an architect, so I'm a member of AIA Vermont. I happen to be chair of the Public Policy Committee, and we've been following a couple of bills in the legislature closely, and one of them is contractor registry. And the initiative there is to try and actually even have a list of who the contractors are that are out there making improvements to people's houses and to other buildings. And right now there really is no consistent way to know who they are and what qualifications they have. And so that stalled in the legislature this session. Didn't quite get across the finish line before they closed for the season, and we're hoping it comes back and gets through next year, because it's so important to include those contractors in the discussion of what's going on. How are you doing it? Are you sure it's working? Do you have the right weatherization policies and procedures in place? Are the details right? Did the blower door test actually happen? Did you measure properly, to get your results? And it's just critical, because research in the last 10 years has proven that air infiltration is more important than thermal insulation. You can't have a well-insulated building without stopping the airflow. So most of the housing stock that we have is built before this, critical review of air leakage, and it's not where it needs to be if we're going to live in a cold climate and turn our heat on. So whatever you can do to keep that message going forward, to get these things done, to help with the climate council work, will be appreciated by everyone. All right, anyone else? Nobody. All right. Anything else on energy in general, or I saw on our agenda, what did I do with my agenda? On our agenda, we also had a discussion of design 5 corners and design review amendments. Are we ready to jump onto one of those, Robin?
I think so. Regina has been waiting patiently.
Regina.
Hi, for some reason my video is not turning on. Oh, there we go. Hello, everybody.
Hi, Regina.
So I sent over a memo on Monday. Did folks get that? Okay. All right, so mostly what I would like to do is just sort of continue our conversation about the purpose and location of the overlay. So again, expanding the concept of the overlay into trunk routes to help hold up the same level of historic preservation and design for the areas approaching the village center. So the memo just hopefully is helpful to explain what the purpose is in the currently worded in the village center, and also applicability, because we talked about that quite a bit. Like in these trunk routes, is everything kicking in at the same level, or is there a lesser degree of projects that would have to be subject to the design review? So first recommendation on this memo is just to ensure that we have some of those specific comments that are specifically in the design 5 corners concept worked into the purpose statements for the village center. So that's pretty straightforward. And then carry those as appropriate into the trunk routes as well. Then I've got some recommendations on the locations for the overlay. So if it's helpful, I can share my screen with this map that we've got.
That would be great. I see a historic map, but is there another one with The overlay?
Yeah, that memo has a hyperlink in it, but that's what I'm gonna open here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So let me zoom out here. And then now I've lost my memo. So let me just see if I can get this in a better spot for myself. Okay, so we'll start with Main Street. This seemed like a fairly easy decision last time. Basically go to 81 Main, which is Essex Town Hall. And I think it makes sense to sort of follow it across to Educational Drive. And I'm assuming we're kind of just thinking that this is one, for the most part, one parcel deep on this road.
Yes.
Okay.
Just while we're there is a, I don't know if your map goes that far, but there is a petition in front of us, or at least there's a suggestion of a petition in front of us to consider altering the zoning along Main Street going all the way up to Crescent View. And I'm not sure everybody's aware of that, but you see how that gray section keeps going all the way up to where it stops there, and there are people that are interested in having that gray overlay go basically both sides of the street all the way up to there. So I just want to throw that out there as we are thinking about it, because graphically it's not a dumb idea. It's actually kind of all possible, and all it would be easy to understand why they're asking for that. But I don't want to slow you down right now. I know that's a whole separate discussion, but I just thought everybody should see, just kind of what we're being asked to consider, and we can treat the rest of that as a separate discussion. I
don't want to prolong it, John. I'll just jump in. My memory, we've seen a request from one property owner who has told us they've contacted other property owners, but I haven't seen any response from them yet. And it reminds me of an application or request we got from a family owned house, intersection of Central Street and Educational Drive. Last time around, from memory, I said the Charbon House, who wanted to change the zoning so they could have a duplex. And the answer was no at that time.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we have an answer or that it's a reasonable thing to consider, but the request is out there, and graphically it has some merit, but I think it's a bigger discussion than we're prepared for right at the moment. So let's stick with Regina's presentation. I don't think it's a stretch to imagine it going out to Educational Drive and 81 Main Street.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So then over to Lincoln Street. Let me zoom out here. So discussion from the last meeting was to go out basically to here, North Street, Grove Street intersection. So I think that makes sense. And I apologize. We will get this corrected on this map, but this red up here is the multifamily mixed use too. It basically looks exactly the same as the village center on this map. But so we're talking about both sides of the road here, between the railroad tracks, Lincoln, and the other side. Does that make sense?
And can you point out where, can we tell where Whitcomb Service Center is? Because that's kind of the landmark going out that way. And it's, I'm not even sure what happens on those tiny little triangular parcels there as you get closer to the intersection you're talking about. Are there any structures out there? Small.
Yes, there's a small house that's actually below grade on, I think, that tightest triangle out there.
This guy?
And I'm not sure the age of that building, but it's been around for a while. It might even be a railroad building for all I know.
Mhm.
That somebody put a house on.
And the next one back is Whitcomb's, and then you have some other, like the larger, that one right there is not Whitcomb's, but they kind of use some of it.
I think that's the what's the word? Congregate housing. It's a collective.
No, that's the one south of that. That's actually Dave Whitcomb's house, I think, right there. The one
Okay.
south of that it's like a halfway house kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the Hard Center, I believe.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so, you've got two purposes worked into this, and I spent a lot of time figuring out if it actually made sense to separate these, a historic preservation overlay, a design overlay separately, because when you start to look at some of these parcels, it's almost like one of those might make sense because it might be a parcel that you would likely see turn over at some point, and if it really becomes something different, you probably really would want to have that design review. But they're not necessarily historic, so you wouldn't necessarily need to be concerned about that. But I think it still makes sense to have them combined as one because they really are supporting each other. So I don't know if that helps to think about it in that way, whether this stretch makes sense or doesn't make sense.
Well, I'll just give my own thoughts, which is the design review overlay has a good amount of language in it about historic properties and about maintaining the character of the village area that it's in, the neighborhood. So I would prefer to see the design control district overlay than just strictly a historic, because I think it allows the village a little more, a larger chance to kind of have something to say about the imagery and the visuals as people enter the village.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep, nicely said, John.
Okay. So let's go to Pearl Street. All right, so Pearl Street is the longest stretch. Let me zoom out here. As we talked about, it would go to West Street Extension. What my memo is saying is I'm not sure if it would be cleaner or more logical to stop at the end of these two here. Because I think this is all right of way here and nothing would happen. And this is just railroad tracks on this side of Pearl Street. So I'm thinking the only real stuff that you'd still want this to apply to is the, whatever district this is, the Highway Arterial Zoning District.
And what's the blue just a little further out? What does it change to?
That's multifamily mixed use. And I'll take the zoning districts off so you can see. So that's that, weird thing.
I don't know. It's a real, look how big those parcels are compared to the housing parcels behind them. It's really a special group of properties. Although I'm not sure why it changes and doesn't keep going all the way down to Susie Wilson Road, really. But it's where's the music store? Isn't that kind of down in that, along there somewhere? I mean, it's hard to know what's. Then you have a whole bunch of new. I don't know how old that map is, but the newer apartment buildings that have grown up there.
Yeah, this map is old. The music store is where you see where it says Pearl Street on there.
Yep.
That's about, it's either there or it's the gray blob
I
that
think
has a
it's the
parking
gray
lot.
blob. The next gray blob to the left.
Right, because I think that one gray blob, there's an apartment complex
Yeah.
that's might be on the spaghetti strip.
Spaghetti strip.
It's long. It actually goes back to another house. There's a set of apartments. I looked at that place when I got here to look for a house. There's actually a house in the back. It has these two strips of condos, and then you got the house in the back. It's kind of an interesting sort of layout.
I guess my point is, if we're trying to be big picture thinkers about what happens along this stretch of street and why does a certain zoning district want to stop and something else start, and I think what I'm trying to say is that over the last 5 years or 10 years, we've seen some improvements like the apartment buildings, and there's some long time uses there like the music building that have defined a certain character along that street, and it's tempting to say that those are that's the trend, to have more commercial and larger residential activities there. But I'd be very curious to hear what Regina and Robin think about that, and the rest of the commissioners.
Hey, John, this is Patrick. I was just thinking as you were speaking, you and Diane, that whole strip is currently kind of under development to some extent. As soon as you get past Susie Wilson, you're starting to get that feel of entering the village to an extent, especially now with that bike path going in, and that whole section of road, I believe, is kind of it's all getting shifted a little bit, isn't it? So your point to why it doesn't get extended all the way down to Susie Wilson in terms of the zoning districts is kind of an interesting thing to think about, considering the current relayout of everything that's going on and the introduction of the bike path that's going to be put in there.
And it is our main transportation route. That is the bus route in and out of our, especially out to our Essex community, and everything on it is sort of saying, we are the kind of property that, all of this efficiency and using less fuel and promoting public transportation and promoting, a completely different way of supporting a more effective, efficient fuel use belongs on that road.
Right.
And, if we can, they're making all kinds of improvements, as you mentioned. Susie Wilson Road going toward Burlington with the fort and all of it's all high level housing. It has been for years and years and years. It wouldn't be a bad thing to see more housing and more support structures. There's been a real lack of things for people at the fort, especially because of their zoning, to go visit,
right. So is it
the brewery that moved out because they couldn't be zoned properly.
Yeah. So, is it too much to, I know Regina, you were suggesting to kind of stop around Warner or so, just because that seems to be geographically in terms of the zoning districts. But we were thinking West Street. Is it too much to say to go all the way to Susie Wilson, knowing it's just that one strip? And as we were just saying, with all the redevelopment, that kind of is the welcome to Essex Junction as soon as you get past Susie Wilson. Is that just way too much oversight that we would want to have And is it more of a question around zoning districts and simplifying that, which is a whole different potentially conversation?
Yeah, from that is sort of what the can of worms, which is an okay can of worms to open, that this conversation is sort of more leading me kind of a little bit more to that. And, you know, I haven't looked at all of these in super great detail, but I don't know, Robin, and your thoughts, like, is it really necessary that there's 4 completely different zoning districts?
No, well, I think, you know, I
As
agree with what
exists-
John said about Lincoln Street. I think the overlay should be primarily about design. And if an individual building happens to be historic, then it'll kick in because of that individual building.
Right.
But no, I think, you know, I say this all the time, you know, when you're coming into an urban area, the meter of the road changes, you know, doesn't happen quite like that here very quickly. But, you know, if you're in the countryside, you might see 1 house, then you might see 2 houses, and then there's 3, 4, 5, 6 houses. Now all of a sudden it's all houses or it's taller buildings. So I think there may be a way with the design overlay to create a meter in the street that just gives you, you know, almost by osmosis, a sense that you're getting closer and closer to the densest part of the community.
Yeah, but is Susie Wilson Road and all the stuff that's going on there actually a magnet at the other end? Right. Like,
Well,
you got all this stuff that you can go do and live next to and be supported by along Susie Wilson Road, and yet that in our scheme is kind of, you know, you're thinking that's where the 1 house is or the 2 houses are, and that we're trying to build up to get the 5 corners. But I guess I'm arguing that there's the other end of it is actually as close to a hub of another kind than the part by 5 corners.
Yeah, I think I was trying to say something similar to that, John. I just didn't say it as well as you did. Yeah, I mean, here, as soon as you cross 5 corners, you're into a denser area. But yet again, you know, it's only on one side of the road because the other side of the road is dominated by the tracks. But yes, I think the design should. I don't see why there can't be 3, 4 bedroom structures along that stretch. I don't see any reason why that couldn't happen.
Anyway,
I guess I have to interject here, is that we're talking about Pearl Street from Susie Wilson down to the jug handle. And Regina, the reason that there's the purple on the other side of Warner is because the jug handle is the next block over. So you've already got 2 houses, then you got a jug handle. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, the Pearl Street section that's blue is, you've got some single families. Most of them have become multi-family internally, even if they don't look that way. Then you've got the apartment buildings that are interspersed in between single family homes with occasional business, which happens to be apartment buildings or what the music store, which isn't the music store anymore, by the way, it's got somebody else in it. And there's a construction company that's got their office there with their construction equipment behind it. And then of course, then we have going to be where Good Stuff is currently, it's going to become an apartment building. So it's a set of a mixed bag of some commercial and apartment buildings with an occasional house that's in there. So, which is different from the purple strip, which is really more commercial. Even the single family homes over there, it was kind of interesting. One single family home used to be a real estate guy, and now it's actually a house, as far as I know, unless it's being rented out. But it's a commercial strip, low grade commercial strip, not the big shopping center, which of course is then in the green section that says Essex Shopping. So it transitions, it becomes more commercial as you come in. But there's a lot of commercial going on in that section. So, but it's just the different degrees. And And yes, I live in that lovely little yellow block behind there on that purple strip. So it's my daily adventure out under Pearl Street.
Phil, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna say, I mean, if we're talking about design review and like with this overlay, and I would be on board to go all the way to Susie Wilson, but I'm gonna say if our desire is to have the review of these trunk roads, then I could make the argument, why not go on all the way out on all these trunk roads, all the way out to the borders of the village? If that's the idea, is that we want to make sure that these trunk roads have like maintain some sort of cohesive vision that we want for the village. We're pretty close on nearly all of them. I think Main Street's probably, Main and Maple are the shortest.
Interesting.
I agree with Phil. My husband keeps berating me about, when I come and I talk about what we do in our meetings. He says, dear, it's all apartment buildings until you get to, right up here at the 159 shopping center. So yes, I think we should extend it all the way out, because otherwise we aren't having any control on our trunk roads. And yes, it's only one side. Nice thing having the state have their conservation district. And the railroad is made that very long strip with be only one side with any housing or commercial development. So I'll interject that and say that, yeah, I agree with Phil. We need to go all the way out, at least on Pearl Street, because otherwise it defeats what we're trying to get for.
Regina, aside from the politics of trying to make that happen, is that do you see any regional planning issues with that concept?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think what you want to be careful about is really the harder piece is the historic preservation. And essentially that map is in the memo to show roughly those are the properties that are going to get kicked in for that purpose. All this other stuff isn't going to get kicked in for that purpose. And I think that's what I would be concerned about in terms of setting an unnecessary hurdle and making it more difficult for some of these properties to become less strip-like, which is what they're like now and what you would ideally hope you're evolving things out of. So I think that's probably fine. And in terms of like a fix, it's certainly easier to just keep the underlying zoning districts as they are. If there is some logic to it, I'm still not quite sure that there is or there isn't, but just putting the design overlay on top of them, I think is probably fine.
Yeah, that's what I anticipated, because then it recognizes the difference of the different districts, but also makes them subject to design review as well. Sort of a second layer, which I think is important in the trunk roads coming into the village. We want people to arrive and think, hey, this is a nice place, let's go deeper, not let's turn around.
Yep.
All right.
So sorry, Regina, am I correct that so that you're saying the concern with extending the overlay is that we have that historical part in it as well? So would it could also be a solution to separate the historical from the design review overlay?
Yeah, I don't think you have to though, because it's clear that even though these will be together and combined as one overlay, the standards are actually two separate sets of standards in it. And the historic preservation standards only kick in for properties that are either already designated or eligible for designation. So it's a much smaller subset, and it's a lot closer to the village.
Okay, thank you.
So I think it's okay. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a problem.
No, I think it'll actually work very well. And the design portion just strengthens in the areas where we have nothing of
Yeah.
substance at the minute.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. Okay, so let's just keep going here. I think Park Street is a much easier conversation. Basically, it would go to Cascade, which I think is okay, right? Because this purple is basically just nothing's going to happen there. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes, Regina.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, then. So Maple Street, let's just zoom out and think through the same concept. I looked all up and down this stretch. I think there's lots of different reasons to go much tighter. There's reasons to go sort of further out. I was kind of really thinking about it from a perspective of what would get kicked in from historic preservation, but also for all of these other homes, kind of comes back a little bit more to what we're going to set the threshold for. But a lot of this is just residential. And this is where I'd be a little bit more concerned that you're kicking some of these folks in because they might want to put an addition on their house.
So I guess the parcels that, I mean, Maple Street Park is essentially village operated and you know, it's got its own situation going on there. That whole purple section is up for grabs. The police station got built on there. That's, you know, nobody's going to have a problem with that. But that really, because of the way they've decided to consider developing that into smaller parcels, that the front, you know, the Maple Street area could be completely different in 10 years. You just don't know. You've got the possibility of some very large buildings showing up there. And, you know, it'd be pretty nice not to see the back end of some light industrial thing happening along there. And I agree that the whole light yellow section is, you know, aside from the church and the school, it's, you know, it's very obviously residential. So the real question is, how do you keep the portions that could develop into things that you might not want as the gateway to your community from being out of reach design wise? You know, we're lucky that the police station actually fronts onto the road, but the master planning for the rest of the purple section there, I don't know that there's a requirement that they actually address the street, the Maple Street side. And that could be a you know, a pretty big consideration for how that builds out.
Right.
Yeah, I had this conversation with my wife actually after our last meeting about that whole area. And I was, yeah, is there anything we can do on, like, as far as this with their, it looks like it's a pretty big plot.
I can't remember. It might be 20 acres, but I can't remember.
Yeah, and they did present a master plan with that, I believe.
They did.
And
John,
I think,
I totally agree with you about, like, that's a major section that could be built up.
Yeah.
all right, so how about the portion between the existing village center and Maple Street Park? Have we what did we just say? We were going to try and go out all the way to Maple Street Park, and or where are we with that?
Yeah, so wasn't a clear decision about quite exactly where to go. When I was looking at it, I kind of ended up landing on Camp Street, Mansfield, essentially. Because there's one business in here, but most of this is just residential. Doesn't necessarily matter for the park, but there is this one sort of condo thing going on there, or rental stuff going on there that might change over. But you could just sort of carry it, if you want to keep the light industrial in, you could just really carry it forward on the south side here. And maybe up here and at Mansfield. But even this, some of these little houses they're probably historic though, so let's look at this guy.
Yeah, I'm going to digress a little here. I'm just thinking about the purple section. I don't know if we can have something in that says something like if a new development doesn't address the street, then it should have a 25 or 35 foot vegetative buffer or something with that ilk. That means they'd be losing a portion of their property, but if they brought it into compliance with any design review we come up with in terms of addressing the street, etc., then they get more space. I don't know if that would work or not, but just a thought.
Robin, if I recall, the spot across from ADL is that there were ball fields bordering on what is a mild wetland area, because it was always and still has cattails on it.
Yeah.
And the trees aren't doing as well as they used to be. And in fact, the cattails seem like they're doing better. So the light industrial area, correct me if I'm wrong, they can still go to 6 stories, can't they?
I think with a waiver, if I remember, I'd have to check that. I think with a waiver they can go to 6, but I'd have to check to confirm that.
Because I thought when they had the master plan, the police station, of course, they wanted that to be a rental versus when the town insisted on buying it, that kind of blew some of their plans. But I thought that everything in this Robinson Parkway to Maple Street area of purple was intended to be that subdivided industrial development. Correct me if I'm wrong. And everything south, where the former IBM building was to continue to be industrial area.
Yeah, no, you're right. It was light industrial. I know we talked about them creating a jogging track or something around it and so on as part of the master plan.
Well,
but now
let me paint you a picture, which is if you drive up Route 7 and you get just past Chimney Corners and you start seeing the Catamount Industrial Park, that's light commercial or light industrial, and it's big warehouses and it's furniture stores and it's what are they now?
Parking ride.
A transit hub. Yeah, but it's buildings that are large and they may not need a lot of parking, but they have very large structures on them compared to what else is around here. And the circulation might suggest that that Maple Street actually sees the back of these things. And I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out, is if there's they can plant a lot of buffers in there if they want, and I'm sure that we can figure out how to make that work. But there may be some reason why we want at least the Maple Street corridor to have a little more just presence. There needs to be some notion that the things that are visible and fairly close to Maple Street have to provide some backstop for your view there that's more than the back of a building. It may not work. Maybe the buffer is the way to go, but you know, for a long time, it's just been a big field. So when you look down there, you just see a field and it's like, oh, that's a nice field. And up until a few years ago, they were still playing softball on it.
Yeah. I will say that a couple of years ago, maybe longer now, Tractor Supply looked at the front of that property, didn't decide to come forward with the proposal.
Yeah.
So something like that's possible. I mean, the land does drop away from Maple Street. So if an applicant decided they didn't want to address Maple Street with a buffer, we could control the view shed and other things. You know, we do need businesses that employ people, not just houses or retail.
I don't know when they took that picture, but look how empty all those parking lots are.
Yeah, really. Well, that parking lot hasn't been used for a long time.
Yeah.
It really hasn't.
The first time I did a project at IBM, which was 20 years ago, I had to park in that parking lot, and I was lucky to get a spot. And you know, look at it now. All right, let's get back on track with Regina's current proposal, which is to go out towards Mansfield Avenue and Camp Street.
Yeah.
And the if we did that, and you did, are you still talking about one parcel deep in there? And it looks like there's an orange section that somehow a bunch of the parcels are both yellow and orange.
That happens occasionally, but I think we are talking about all design overlays going, you know, one parcel.
You know, there's some really big parcels in there. I've seen and heard people, you know, the houses that are out front are actually nice, you know, contributing buildings, whether they're listed or not. I'm sure they're eligible. Mm-hmm. And they have a large parcel behind them that you could imagine could be developed. And I'm not sure most people would even notice that happening. But why do we know why that zoning doesn't follow the parcel? Why it cuts them in half? Is that just a trick of the map?
That's not uncommon in the village, John. It happens on Park Street. It happens in other places too.
Would we have a reason to want to modify that so that maybe the larger parcels could actually see some more infill development? I'm thinking housing, of course.
Well, I guess my question is there is a development that it's farther up the street. I took my bike out the other day, and I noticed this house that used to have these concrete cylinders in front of it is gone. I think it's 41 Maple. It's gone. It's been demolished. And I hadn't aware that there was like an acre behind this house.
Yeah.
But now with that house gone, it certainly would open it up to development that I wasn't contemplating.
That's just what Handy was looking at, right?
Yeah, you may have
that's
missed
the parcel. Yeah.
Gabe Handy's presentation where he's proposing to build, I think it was 6 units in there as a PUD. And it's a fairly large parcel, kind of sitting there essentially landlocked, but there must be a right of way through to it. But it's railroad owned property. It used to be on a rail line. There was an old rail line that went through there.
Right.
And so Robin might be able to show you his concept plan for that. But you know, somebody's trying to make that work. And again, it would barely be, you know, it would, if you didn't kind of look down through an opening in Maple Street, you almost wouldn't notice it was there, but it is actually pretty visible.
But it is now without that house being up. I mean, Well, like I said, I didn't know, wasn't aware. I always knew that that house was there, and they had used cylinders to create a wall so that the house was not on a hill. It was more of on a bluff. But I know that a lot of the houses that are in that section there are somewhat historic. I know that Camp Street is one of the older streets in the village. And it used to have, get this, camps on it. Well, Camp Street eventually goes back down to a condo association, I believe.
Yeah.
But stopping at Mansfield Avenue might make sense for that overlay district. I'm just not aware of how many buildings on that street are still in a historic nature. A lot of them have been altered a lot.
I bet it's 50-50. There's some beautiful old houses along that stretch.
There are.
Yeah.
I like the yellow and purple one. It's kind of interesting.
All right. So what we said before was that the overlay, the design overlay, would afford us some ability to review projects as they came in there to see what was happening, and we would be able to have the village center historic requirements in there or not. What did we say about that?
I think it makes sense to keep it in there unless, yeah, like this stretch is a good example that if you look at the historic sites map in the memo, it goes all the way through Mansfield Avenue, basically. But,
yeah.
You know, the only thing that would kind of make sense if it felt like, you know, these first two blocks really have lost their historic character at this point, then maybe you keep them out of it because it is a higher level of burden. But I agree. I think it's hard to say. I think it really is mixed in there. What still has historic character that you want to preserve and what doesn't, which is fine. It'll just be sort of a case by case.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're hoping anyway, is that, you know, okay, where you do have a contributing building or it's eligible or it's, you know, that has that much character, then we should be able to use the rules that we have in place to protect the village character, not necessarily an individual structure. There's kind of a bigger picture going on.
Right.
And that just gives us a chance to have something to say rather than nothing. And we were careful to write them to say, you know, like, this is not like Williamsburg, Virginia. We're not going to tell you everything you have to do on these parcels. We're going to have a little to say, but not to the extent that it's Secretary of Interior standards and so on. It's not mandatory.
Yep. Okay.
Phil, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to say that I think why not just extend it down to those last 5 parcels past Maple Street Park and the one parcel down, one parcel in on the other side before the school. And I think that if we're going to go down that route and then see what we can do with the light industrial section, but for me, that makes the most sense. And I think, and I mean, I live on Pleasant Street or walk on Maple, and I think there is a lot of character on Maple Street down in that area. So I think it makes sense for me.
I'm counting on the historic map, and there are 28 structures along, most of them on the north side of Maple Street, but there are 28 structures between kind of where the railroad lines cross and where you get to camp. 28 structures that are on the historic list already on Maple Street. So, but then none after that. So none going east on Maple Street. So I guess I'm definitely in support of Regina's suggested limit, and I would like to see maybe those larger parcels. You know, I guess I'd like to see somebody explain why the zoning should change in the middle of somebody's parcel. And that kind of, I've been on both sides of that before, and it's kind of obnoxious when you have a parcel that you know, is in two districts, because it can really it impacts potential development on that parcel significantly. And I'm not sure that's what we're trying to say. Anyone else? Any members of the commission that have not said something yet would like to say anything? Any members of the public have anything to say about this particular discussion? I'm seeing Mia and
Hi,
Mia?
yes, I just wanted to say I definitely appreciate the discussions you're having, and I know that historic character and preserving the village is important, but just speaking from the Housing Commission perspective, I'd encourage the Planning Commission to consider allowing the densest possible, most housing-friendly policies when there is a discussion and a debate, just because, you know, I think it's essential that we make every effort to allow more affordable development to continue in the village. So I appreciate the work you're doing, and I think it's very interesting. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I think you didn't ask me if I had anything to say, but you know I always do. I think it makes sense to just go around the back of the properties at Front Street. So whether it's a small lot or a large lot, you're subject to the same design overlay.
So you mean, Robin, for these parcels that John is talking about?
Yeah.
The whole parcel would be in the overlay.
Yeah, the criteria is it fronts the street, therefore the whole of the parcel is pulled into the design overlay.
There's only 4 parcels that applies to, and 3 of them are very large.
Yeah.
And one of them is not quite so large, but I'm not sure why the line was drawn that way. Anyway, that's my recommendation. I'm happy to have others comment, and then Regina and Robin can talk about it, and maybe we can get a coordinated plan that shows this overlay boundary for one of our upcoming sessions.
Yeah.
And because ultimately we have to kind of take some kind of vote on this and recommend that it move forward.
Yeah, and I think it's just a little, I mean, it can be a evolving discussion, but I think when we get into the more detail about what exactly is getting kicked in, it is helpful for you to have a good solid sense of what areas you're talking about, because that might influence what the criteria is, if that makes sense. Which I'm hoping to start talking about a little bit now if we have time.
All right. I'm going to try and hold us to 8 o'clock tonight, just for fun.
Okay, that sounds good. But I'm sorry, can I just get a little bit of a sense, because this property is potentially going to come forward, I think we're still just talking about one parcel deep here, right? Or do we want to?
We're currently talking about one parcel deep, so I'm not sure that gets covered in our current discussion, but I think that parcel has its own challenges in that it has an awful lot of abutters. And so the scrutiny on how you develop this without bothering, let's say, the neighborhood is gonna hold it to a pretty high standard already.
Yeah, and I think it'll probably come through before we're finished with the code update anyway.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Okay. All right. So.
But I do want to echo what Mia said, which is, in general, the exceptional clamor over housing in the region our places that are walkable and within reach of the bus station and the train station and the amenities that our village has to offer, which are many, should receive our highest attention for allowing the most flexible housing options possible.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, Regina.
It's funny you bring up the train station, John, isn't it? Regional Planning Commission meeting.
After you got to let Regina finish, and then we can hear about the train station.
Tally
okay.
ho.
So I'm going to stop sharing, and then so the last point in the memo is so we're clear on historic preservation. Essentially, you're kicked into historic preservation if you're already listed or you're eligible for listing. And like John explained, there's some flexibility in there. You're not like being crazy about this.
Can I ask one question? So structurally, that's built into the village center district?
That's how it's worded.
Can you figure out how to structurally build that into the village as a whole? Because there are lots of historic or eligible structures that are outside the village center, and I can't remember how the land development code gets you to the language about historic if you're outside the village center.
Yeah, so currently it's only in the village center. I think what we've been talking about is extending it via this overlay to these trunk routes. Are you suggesting even more than that?
I'm just wondering, if somehow, if you're on the list of historic eligible structures, no matter where you are, how are you dealt with? And that you don't have to answer that now, but that's a worthwhile question because the list is completely not contained within the current language boundary. And so if we want to extend some type of extra consideration to any building in the village that's on the historic list or eligible to be on the historic list, that's a entirely, we haven't dealt with that at all. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm just, I'm suggesting that there might be, it might be something that we want to look at and we may decide to do nothing. Unless it's on a trunk route and it gets a lot of traffic and people can see it and it's highly visible, maybe we don't do anything. Let's see, Natalie, your hand is up again. Quickly, because we got 15 minutes to get the rest of Regina's presentation.
Okay, just wanted to say how much I appreciate the fact that you all are thinking about that smart growth approach to things where things are bikeable, walkable, amenities close enough. The Energy Committee loves you for that. Thank you for thinking in those terms.
Thank you. All right, Regina.
Okay, so in terms of applicability for the design part of it, my suggestion in these outer areas is that you get kicked in for this level of review if you're doing a proposed addition to an existing building or a demolition and reconstruction. Regular maintenance, exterior alterations, and change of use would be exempt.
Sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
The only thing that I would be slightly hesitant about is a current single-family home doing an addition. That's not historic.
You bring up a good point in that there are all kinds of ways to do additions to historic buildings that don't necessarily have to be historic in and of themselves. And it's one of the greatest challenges architects have. It's a lot of fun. How do you do something that doesn't negative? The real test is, are you negatively impacting the character of the main building, or are you different enough but still sensitive that you have created a supporting structure and not detracted from the main structure? And that's really the test, because you can build all kinds of things. You can build a glass box next to a historic building, and in certain contexts that's deemed acceptable. So I don't have a problem with the general idea that somebody's going to build an addition onto a historic building, but I think that should be covered under the review process.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
So what about non-historic single-family homes? That's what I mean. That they want to do an
well,
addition.
if it's in the view corridor, I'm thinking, or our overlay district, I'm thinking it still applies.
Yeah, the design review. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, just
the historic fact just means we have a different set of tests to run it through, but and some sensibilities to be careful with. But the general principle applies. What are you doing? What does it look like? And does it maintain the character of the village?
right. And again, going back to the historic ones, John, I mean, from my perspective, we're looking to see if what they're doing is sympathetic. We don't want a faux addition. Sometimes it's nice to be able to tell the difference between the historic building and the addition. It can still be sympathetic, but clearly say, we built this 2021 and put it onto something that was built in 1890,
Yep. Good. Anybody else? All right. Carry on.
That's it. End of the memo.
Wow.
So Maple Street is still confusing, but otherwise I think we have a clear way ahead. So we will move on.
Excellent.
Yeah, I liked what Phil said, where he said, maybe we take the design district out to the point where we reach the light industrial and we deal with the light industrial as a separate entity. I think that's what you're saying, Phil.
Yeah, and to be clear, I'm fine with going up to Mansfield as well with the recommended plan as well. But I just figured why not put it out there as well.
To the school.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you, Regina.
Thank you.
John,
Thank you,
can I talk
Regina.
about the train station now?
Yeah, all we really have left to do is approve a set of minutes, but sure, go ahead and tell us about the train station.
Okay, it was interesting. I was at a CCRPC meeting Tuesday, and there was a scoring done by someone based on equity, and just going through it, and I don't know whether the person was familiar with the actual train station. And I started to think, well, we shouldn't be calling it the Essex Junction train station. We should be calling it the Essex Junction multimodal facility, because it's actually the only one in Chittenden County that has buses and trains in the one location. There's nowhere else in Chittenden County that you can get off a train and onto a bus or vice versa. at the same location. It's the only one. It's also in a designated village center. It's also on paths, sidewalks. It also has, taxi stand for as long as taxis are still used. So the CCRPC, being their usual accommodating self, have said yes, they will change it to the Essex Junction multimodal facility because it's more than a train station. But the interesting thing about the equity review was, I'm not going into too many details. In the original table, the train station was number 3. After the equity review, the train station was number 6, which dumbfounded me, having grown up in a very low income household with no cars available. Public transit was critical, not just to go to your job, but to get to the interview to try and get the job. So it had been my impression that an equity review would actually keep it where it was or bump it up in the scoring. It did not. It dropped it down, dropped it from 3 to 6 twice. There were 2 equity scoring 1, equity scoring 2, and it dropped it down twice. So, the fact that it's going through an ADA upgrade makes it available to more people yet again. As I always say, it's accessibility. It's not the word that, some architects use occasionally. It's not just if you're disabled. Sometimes, John will play ice hockey and maybe doesn't walk as well as he used to. It's useful for that. People with young kids, so many reasons for it to be accessible. So that's being done. They're now doing it in 2 phases, which will mean they won't touch the platform until the track is raised for the connector road. Until a month ago, they thought they were doing it all at once. Now they've agreed not to. But I think, we need to keep our finger on these things. Sometimes, there's so many things happening. There's so many balls in the air. It's hard to catch them all the time. But these things go through, and all of a sudden, well, it was agreed to. I will say that the TAC, the Transportation Advisory Commission, they voted just to send the original table to the CCRPC board. So the tables with the equity scoring were not sent to the board. I don't know whether that matters or not, but it seems to me the equity scoring missed the mark by a mile. Because if you're low income, you need transportation to get to where you need to go. And when you're close to a facility that provides bus, train, sidewalk, taxi, that's as good as it gets these days.
Housing.
All that stuff, affordable housing, all that stuff. That's as good as it gets. So we'll see where it goes. And as I often say, I just don't want to hear the answer. You can ask the same question 10 different ways and get 10 different answers. I want to hear the question that elicited the answer. So maybe I'll understand better how the scoring came out. So I've asked that. We haven't received it yet. But I did communicate this I did send an email to the CCRPC, and as usual, they're wonderful people. I shared that email with Andrew Brown, Dan Kieran, because he's the village rep on the CCRPC board, and Evan. So I've done my bit. I will say Dennis Lutz from the town is in agreement with what I said. So hopefully we'll work through it, and it'll all come out fine in the end. Any planning commission members have any thoughts, comments?
Keep pushing. We're right behind you. We're with you.
Yeah, it's just, just having, being Irish, growing up the way I did, I've experienced a lot, of discrimination. When my parents took me to London, when my dad got a job there when I was 9, I'm being pulled around the streets by my mother and father, and everywhere we go to try and rent an apartment, it says no blacks, no Irish. So I experienced some of that stuff, maybe not in the same way that African Americans do in America, but we couldn't get a job in Belfast, so he couldn't even get a job in his own country, so he had to go to London, and he couldn't get anywhere to live, even though he had a job. So if it hadn't been for public transit, we couldn't have got there. So
Yeah, no, I think the public transit angle is big. It's still underutilized. You know, the bus system is still struggling. The train station, even though I think I heard that we were the busiest train station in Vermont, that's still pretty limited, you know, pressure and not quite enough to really gain a lot of attention. So unfortunately, we're just way ahead of the curve. You know, maybe when the train starts to become more used and has
July 19th, come to the station July 19th. The Amtrak station's going to have its first trip July 19th. I will say, and I'm digressing, Irishmond. You know, a lot of money was put in to get from Burlington to New York by train. Was it 8.5, 9 hours? With the replacement of 20, I think it's 22 miles of track in New Hampshire, which the right of way is owned by the state of New Hampshire, you get on a train in Essex Junction and get to Boston in under 4 hours. Now that's competitive with public transport. We had people in here earlier talking about energy. That's very competitive. And I think if we're thinking holistically about transportation in New England, if I can go to Burlington and be in New York in 45 minutes, I'm not sure I'm going to take a 9-hour train. Yeah. If I go to Essex Junction and be in Boston 4 hours, why would I drive? I'm getting out of the train right in the center of Boston. I'm on the East Coast Main Line. I could probably get a train from Boston to New York in 3.5 hours. Be even faster.
That'd be good.
Change trains.
So Robin, I heard something about the train coming to Burlington. So is it to bypass Essex Junction, or is it going to be a separate? Are we part of the network?
That's a big discussion.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Maybe 9 years ago, the track from Springfield, Massachusetts, up to Enosburg was upgraded to welded rail for like $52 million or something. Neither the village or any other municipality along that track or the state have piggybacked on that massive investment to see what we could get from it. You know, when we connect to Montreal, Canadians can come down on the train, get off the train, get a bus or a taxi right up to Stowe and ski if they get off at Essex Junction, which Amtrak calls Burlington Essex Junction. If they get off in Essex Junction, it's an Uber, a rental car, a bus into Burlington in 25 minutes. We're at the fulcrum of the Eastern and Western rail line. And there's a term called key settlement policies. We haven't really been recognized as a key settlement for trains or public transit. And if we were, we'd probably get the investment we need to get something back for having the train here for like 180 years. And somehow or other, I mean, I think it's Montpelier, I think it's elected officials. We need somehow or other to get focus on that to make sure that, this is an asset we have. Is it an eyesore at the moment? Yes, but you kiss the frog, it's a prince. It could be an asset, and we really need to be, pushing gentle but firm force in the powers that be to get that recognized, because it's the track, the station, everything. It's an asset that hasn't yet been realized.
Thank you, Robin. I'm moving on to minutes, and then I'll look for a motion to adjourn. So can I get a motion to approve the minutes of May 6th, 2021?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Did I hear one?
Yeah, second.
Oh, thank you. Any discussion or corrections on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor of the minutes as written, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And unless anybody has any last comments, we'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
And a second?
Bye, Regina.
All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Thank you very
Against?
much.
Thank you all, and thank you guests. This is as many guest members of the audience as we've had in a long time. So thank you all very much for your time.
Enjoy your dinner, John.